Brother Syntalis had always found it odd that the monks never chanted. For a place that called itself a monastery, the silence was deafening. The only sound that punctuated the oppressive quiet was the hum of the cloning vats, an ambience they claimed was soothing, like a cosmic lullaby. Syntalis thought it sounded more like a badly tuned refrigerator. But then again, what did he know? He was just a human in a place run by aliens masquerading as monks, trying to turn Earth into their personal Zen garden. He sat in the cold metal chair of the contemplation room, which resembled a cross between a dentist's office and a medieval torture chamber, though, in truth, that was more of an aesthetic choice than any particular function. A faint green light flickered above him, casting a sickly pallor that made everything look like a low-budget horror film. He could almost hear a ghostly scream in the background, though it was probably just his imagination. Syntalis leaned back, trying to ignore the itch in his robes. Yes, robes. The aliens had a great sense of humor, forcing humans to wear monk garb while they ran around in slick bodysuits that practically screamed we're from another planet. But don't mind us. If nothing else, they were remarkably consistent in their irony. Just as he was mentally drafting his next letter of complaint, a useless exercise, given there was nobody to send it to, Brother Xyler slithered in. The alien resembled a cross between a praying mantis and an overgrown fern, all limbs and fronds and a disturbingly serene face. It was the kind of face that promised peace, tranquility, and a total absence of humor. "Brother Syntalis," Xyler said in a voice that could only be described as a whisper on steroids, "you seem troubled. Only if you consider being trapped in a fake monastery by aliens with a penchant for genetic tinkering troubled." Syntalis replied with a grin that was about as genuine as a 3-credit note. Xyler tilted its head, an action that Syntalis had learned meant it was processing something profound, or it was about to sneeze. "The harmonics of your aura are fluctuating. Maybe I'm just vibing differently today." Syntalis crossed his arms, resisting the urge to roll his eyes. "What's on the agenda?" "More silent chanting. The Elder Ones have devised a new path for spiritual enlightenment," Xyler said, unperturbed by Syntalis' sarcasm. "We shall be exploring the depths of self through molecular meditation." "Molecular meditation. Sounds like a blast. Will there be snacks afterwards?" "Nourishment is provided through spiritual fulfillment," Xyler replied as if it was the most obvious thing in the universe. "Right," Syntalis muttered. "Spiritual fulfillment. Now if only I could eat that." Xyler moved closer, its fronds brushing against Syntalis' arm. "Do not resist the process, Brother Syntalis. Embrace it." It was hard to resist the process when you were knee-deep in it, but Syntalis figured he'd play along for now. If nothing else, it beat staring at the green light until it drove him mad, or madder, depending on how you looked at it. As Xyler led him down the corridor, Syntalis couldn't help but notice the subtle hum that permeated the air. It was a reminder of the lab's true purpose, a factory of pacification. The aliens had decided that religion was the key to subduing humanity, and what better way than creating a synthetic faith tailored to keep people docile? It was genius, really. Evil genius, but genius nonetheless. They passed rows of incubation pods, each housing what could only be described as a work in progress. Human figures floated in viscous liquid, their expressions mirroring a bizarre mix of serenity and confusion, like they were dreaming of a vacation on a dystopian beach. "All part of the grand plan, I'm sure," Syntalis commented, nodding towards the pods. "Creating a peaceful army of Zen warriors, right?" "They are the future of humanity," Xyler said, almost reverently. "A testament to our harmonious coexistence." "I doubt they'd agree," Syntalis quipped, "assuming they could think for themselves." "In time, they shall achieve enlightenment," Xyler replied with such conviction that Syntalis almost believed it. They reached a chamber that Xyler grandly referred to as the Hall of Introspection. Syntalis thought it looked more like a gymnasium that had been redecorated by an avant-garde artist, with a penchant for chrome and uncomfortable seating. The other monks, a ragtag group of humans in itchy robes and vacant expressions, were already seated in a perfect circle. Syntelis took his place, trying not to think about how much it resembled a group therapy session for the existentially conflicted. Xyler stood at the center, arms raised as if about to conduct an orchestra of the damned. Let us begin by centering ourselves, aligning our energies with the cosmic resonance. Syntelis closed his eyes, because what the hell else was he going to do? There was only so much cynicism one could project before it became exhausting. The session dragged on, a blur of semi-coherent chants and dubious spiritual exercises designed to mold them into the pliable believers the aliens so desperately wanted. Syntelis half expected them to break out the incense and start chanting about the great galactic oneness any minute. But then something happened. A whisper in the back of his mind, a flicker of rebellion that couldn't be snuffed out by green lights and hums and promises of enlightenment. It was there, simmering beneath the veneer of compliance, waiting for the right moment to boil over. When the session finally ended, Syntelis felt more tired than enlightened. Xyler approached him, its posture conveying an alien form of concern. "Brother Syntelis, your aura remains turbulent. Must be something I ate," Syntelis replied, shrugging. "Maybe too much spiritual nourishment. The path to inner peace is arduous," Xyler said, almost as if it believed its own propaganda. "Yeah, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions," Syntelis muttered under his breath. As he left the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change. Maybe it was the whisper of rebellion, or maybe it was just indigestion. Either way, he knew he couldn't keep playing the part of a compliant monk forever. Back in his quarters, an austere cell that was about as welcoming as a prison, Syntelis lay on his cot and stared at the ceiling. He had a decision to make. Stay and allow the aliens to mold humanity into something unrecognizable, or find a way to disrupt their grand plan. It was a choice between the devil you knew and the one you didn't. Neither option was particularly appealing, but then again, life was rarely about appealing choices. More often, it was about making the least terrible one. "Time to stir the pot," he muttered to himself, feeling the rebellious spark ignite into a flame. The next morning, as the monastery woke from its slumber, Syntelis was ready. He had a plan, not a good one, but it was better than nothing. He'd start small, test the waters, see how deep the rabbit hole really went. And if he drowned, well, at least he wouldn't die in a robe. As he walked through the corridors, he couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Here he was, a lone human in a monastery run by aliens, about to take on the impossible. It was almost laughable. But then again, if humanity had taught the universe anything, it was that humans were nothing if not stubborn. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Brother Xyler was waiting for him, as always, with that same serene expression. "Brother Syntelis, are you ready for another day of enlightenment?" Syntelis grinned. "Absolutely. Let's make it a memorable one." The aliens might have thought they had humanity figured out, but they were about to learn just how unpredictable humans could be, and Syntelis couldn't wait to teach them. Syntelis was feeling rather spry for someone who was essentially a rat in a very large, alien-designed maze. His plan, shoddy as it might have been, was simple enough. Explore the less-traveled corridors of the monastery and maybe trip over some big secret the aliens were trying to hide. Hey, it was better than twiddling his thumbs while waiting for his brain to be scrambled in their molecular meditation sessions. The monastery was a labyrinth of polished metal and humming technology, the kind of place where you could wander for days without encountering another soul. Which, frankly, was a bit of a selling point. He'd had enough of the alien sermons and their harmonious coexistence propaganda to last a lifetime. So he slipped down a side corridor, away from the main path, hoping to find something interesting, or at least, something that didn't involve silent chanting or spiritual fulfillment. As he walked, he passed more of those incubation pods. The humans inside floated like ghosts in a mist, their eyes closed, faces serene. It was hard not to imagine them waking up and attacking like extras in some low-budget sci-fi horror film. That's the thing about aliens. They never understood the concept of too far. They'd probably thought of this as a growth opportunity for humanity, when in fact, it was more like turning the entire species into lab rats. Eventually, he stumbled upon a door marked with alien symbols that looked like a child's attempt at drawing spaghetti. Intrigued, he pushed it open, half expecting an alarm to blare. Instead, it just quietly whooshed open, revealing a room filled with screens and blinking lights. The kind of place where mad scientists might gather to discuss world domination over cups of steaming black coffee, or whatever the alien equivalent was. The screens displayed various images and data streams, most of which were far beyond Scintillus's comprehension. But there was one thing he recognized: Earth. Or at least, a holographic representation of it, spinning lazily in the room's center like a doomed apple in a cosmic Bob for Apples game. Little dots of light pulsed across its surface, highlighting cities, populations. There was something unnervingly clinical about it, as if the whole planet had been reduced to little more than a board game for the aliens. Planning a vacation, a voice behind him said, making him nearly jump out of his skin. He turned to find Sister Amara standing there, a fellow human who looked about as thrilled to be here as a cat at a dog show. She had her robes on, of course, but there was a defiance in her eyes that suggested she was about one bad day away from setting the whole place on fire. Amara, Scintillas said, trying to appear nonchalant as his heart rate returned to something resembling normal. Taking a break from the enlightening silence, she smirked, which was a good sign. I see you're keeping yourself entertained. Get tired of their spiritual soap operas, their reruns, Scintillas replied with a shrug. Thought I'd see what they're really up to. He gestured to the holographic Earth. Looks like a regular alien invasion, doesn't it? Amara studied the spinning planet, her eyes narrowing. More like an alien science fair project. What happens when you introduce religion to a secular society? Bet they get top marks for creativity, Scintillas quipped. I'm guessing this isn't just about us finding inner peace. They're running some kind of experiment. Exactly, Amara replied, crossing her arms. And if that's the case, we're the lab rats. Lovely. So what do we do about it? Scintillas asked, leaning against a console that probably controlled something important. He couldn't have cared less. Amara's eyes were alight with something that might have been hope, or at least something close to it. Expose the whole operation. Let people know what's really happening here. Easy as pie, Scintillas said dryly. Just need to get some footage, hijack the alien broadcasting network and… Oh wait, no equipment, no access, and an alien monk breathing down our necks at all times. Minor details, Amara said, waving a hand dismissively. We can figure that out. It's the getting caught part that worries me. Ah, yes. Our mutual friend Brother Zyler would just love to catch us in the act, Scintillas mused. Probably throw us into a cloning vat as punishment. They'd probably just reprogram us as happy little monks, Amara said with a grimace. Living our lives out in blissful ignorance, worse than death, Scintillas agreed. So we'll have to be careful. I say we start by mapping these lower corridors. There has to be a way in and out without tripping an alarm. Amara nodded, her expression turning serious. And we need allies. More eyes on this means less chance of us disappearing quietly. Know anyone who's not already sold on the alien snake oil? Scintillas asked. Maybe, Amara said slowly. Their sister Lysa. She's been skeptical ever since they introduced the cloning vats. Keeps asking too many questions for their liking. Perfect. We'll need all the help we can get. Just remember, Amara said, her expression turning grave, no heroics. We can't afford to tip them off. No capes and tights then. Got it, Scintillas replied with a grin. Besides, I've always preferred the role of reluctant sidekick. They shared a conspiratorial smile, the kind that comes from knowing you're about to do something incredibly stupid, and yet somehow utterly necessary. With a new sense of purpose, they started mapping the corridors, jotting down notes on whatever scraps they could find. It was tedious work, but there was a certain thrill to it, like they were spies in an old noir film. All they needed were trench coats and a soundtrack by some swing band. Hours later, they were back in Scintillus's quarters, comparing notes. "There's an access tunnel here," Amara said, pointing to a smudge that was supposed to be a map. "Leads to the lower levels, think it's clear?" Scintillus asked, skeptical. "Probably not," Amara said, "but unless you've got a better idea, it's our best shot." Scintillus leaned back on his cot, thinking. "All right, let's make it happen." Just then, a soft chime echoed through the room, a signal for evening meditation. It was a reminder that even as they schemed, the alien machine kept turning, relentless and unyielding. "Looks like it's showtime," Amara said, rolling her eyes. "Ready to pretend we're good little monks again always," Scintillus said, standing. "Can't let them suspect we're plotting their downfall, now can we?" They shared a final glance before heading back into the corridors. The monastery was silent but for the ever-present hum of the cloning vats. It was a sound that had become far too familiar, one that seemed to seep into their very bones. As they joined the other monks in the hall of introspection, Scintillus couldn't help but feel a sense of impending change. The aliens had underestimated them, dismissing humanity as just another species to be molded and controlled. But they didn't realize that beneath the surface rebellion simmered, waiting for the right moment to erupt. "Keep your eyes open," Amara whispered as they took their seats. "This isn't over yet." "Not by a long shot," Scintillus agreed, settling into the uncomfortable meditation pose. Around them, the other monks sat in serene silence, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Brother Xyler watched them from the center of the circle, his expression unreadable. Was he aware that things were slipping out of his, or rather, its control? If so, it gave no sign. As the session began, Scintillus closed his eyes, feigning calmness, but inside, his mind was a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. Together with Amara, he'd take the first steps toward uncovering the truth, and maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to turn the tide. The session dragged on, an exercise in testing patience as much as anything else. When it finally ended, Scintillus stood, feeling more determined than enlightened. He and Amara exchanged a brief, knowing look before joining the rest of the monks as they filed out. There was a long way to go, and the path ahead was fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long time, Scintillus felt something akin to hope. As they left the hall together, Xyler's eyes followed them, its alien gaze inscrutable. Was it suspicious, or was it merely curious? Either way, Scintillus knew they'd have to tread carefully. One wrong move, and they'd find themselves at the mercy of the very creatures they sought to expose. "Ready for round two?" Amara asked, a touch of humor in her voice as they neared their quarters. "Always," Scintillus replied with a grin. After all, nobody does rebellion quite like humans. With that, they parted ways, each moving to their quarters under the watchful eye of alien surveillance. Behind them, the soft hum of the monastery continued, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, of the storm gathering within its walls. It was a gamble, a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to win. After all, there was one thing the aliens hadn't accounted for: the human spirit, stubborn and irrepressible as it was. And that, Scintillus thought with a grin, might just be enough to tip the scales in their favor. Scintillus found himself in the contemplation room again. Well, more like the room of extreme discomfort if you asked him. It was kinda like sitting in a dentist's chair while being serenaded by a choir of malfunctioning robots. He shifted in his seat, trying to ignore Brother Xyler's gratingly serene voice as it led the group in another round of molecular meditation. The aliens claimed it was supposed to align their molecules or some nonsense like that. Scintillus was convinced it was just an excuse to see how long they could sit still without imploding. "Brother Scintillus," Xyler said, its insectoid eyes locking onto him with unsettling precision, "you appear distracted." "Just contemplating the meaning of life," Scintillus replied, not missing a beat. Or at least the meaning of this glorified yoga class. Xyler tilted its head, which was as close as it ever got to showing emotion. Your humor is noted, though your understanding seems lacking. Compassionate as always, Xyler, Syntelis muttered under his breath. The alien droned on, its voice as soothing as a chainsaw lullaby. Around him, the other monks were either genuinely buying into this cosmic charade or doing a damn fine job pretending. Syntelis suspected it was a bit of both. It was easier to play along when you didn't know the game was rigged. After what felt like an eternity, the session finally ended, releasing them back into the polished metal maze that was their home. Amara, ever the beacon of rebellious energy, sidled up to him as they filed out. "Learn anything new?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Just that my molecules are as aligned as they are ever gonna be," Syntelis replied with a shrug. "But I did overhear something interesting. Xyler mentioned doubling the meditation sessions." Amara rolled her eyes. Oh joy! As if one session of pseudo-spiritual torture wasn't enough. "Means they're getting nervous," Syntelis pointed out. "Might be time to step up our game." They walked the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. It was like being inside a giant, metallic cathedral where the only hymns were the whirs and hums of alien tech. Later, back in his room, Syntelis started sorting through the notes they'd managed to compile. Bits of information, half-baked plans, and a whole lot of what-ifs. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He heard a soft knock at the door. Amara slipped inside, looking slightly more frazzled than usual. "Got news," she said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "There's talk of a new initiative. Some kind of enhanced meditative trance." "Let me guess," Syntelis said. "A blissful experience akin to sticking your head in a blender." "Close," Amara replied. "It's supposed to deepen our connection with the universe, but really I think it's just another way to keep us in line." Syntelis sighed, rubbing his temples. "They're tightening the screws. We're gonna need more than notes and good intentions. Which is why we're gonna crash their little alien party," Amara declared, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "And by crash, you mean steal some of their tech, get into the mainframe, and broadcast our findings," she explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Of course," Syntelis said dryly. "Why didn't I think of that?" Amara laughed, a sound that was almost out of place in the sterile environment. "We're gonna need more allies, though. Sister Lysa's in, but we can't do it with just 3. Syntelis nodded, already thinking. "There's Brother Kellen. He's been giving the whole universe oneness thing the side eye ever since they started the mandatory chants." "Perfect. Let's talk to him after evening prayer." The plan was reckless, dangerous, and borderline suicidal, but it was the best shot they had. In a place designed to break their spirits, defiance was their sharpest weapon. Evening came, bringing with it another round of forced introspection. Syntelis sat through it, eyes closed, mind racing with possibilities. Amara sat beside him, a silent pillar of determination. They were in it together, come hell or high water or alien cloning vats. Afterwards, they cornered Brother Kellen in the corridor. He was a tall, wiry man with a perpetual frown, like someone had just told him his life was a bad joke and he was still waiting for the punchline. "Got a moment?" Syntelis asked, falling into step beside him. "Depends," Kellen replied warily. "What are you selling?" "Freedom," Amara said, cutting to the chase. "From this place." Kellen stopped, eyeing them both with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "Keep talking." They laid out their plan, such as it was. Kellen listened, arms crossed, his face unreadable. When they finished, there was a long pause. "You're both crazy," he finally said. "But damn if it doesn't sound like the best idea I've heard since we got here." Syntelis grinned. "So you're in?" "I'm in," Kellen agreed, some of the tension easing from his posture. "Someone's gotta keep you from getting yourselves killed." "That's the spirit," Amara said, clapping him on the back. They parted ways, each heading to their quarters with a newfound sense of purpose. The aliens might have been tightening their grip, but humans were nothing if not resourceful and stubborn as hell. Back in his room, Syntelis sat in the dim light, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The monastery hummed around him, a living machine with its own rhythms and secrets. But inside its walls, rebellion was stirring, and he intended to see it through. The next morning brought a new twist. During breakfast, if you could call the tasteless nutrient-paced breakfast, Brother Zyler made an announcement. "We will begin a new program of intensive meditation," it declared. "This will enhance your spiritual growth and deepen your connection to cosmic truths." Translation: Welcome to Double Meditation Hell. Population: you. The room was silent, the humans exchanging uneasy glances. Syntelis caught Amara's eye and she rolled hers in response. They'd expected a reaction, but this was faster than anticipated. After the meal, they reconvened in the corridors. Kellen joined them, his expression grim. "Can't say I didn't see this coming," he said, scratching his chin. "They really are ramping things up." "Then we need to act fast," Amara said, "before they turn us into mindless drones." Syntelis nodded, looking around. "Let's meet in the storage room tonight. We can go over the details." As the day dragged on, nerves were running high. Every alien glance felt like a spotlight, every chime of the intercom like an alarm. But fear was a funny thing. It could paralyze you or sharpen your focus. And right now, Syntelis was running on pure adrenaline. That evening, the trio gathered in the cramped storage room. Among stacks of alien supplies and boxes of unknown origin, they outlined their plan. It was like a heist movie, only with less charm and more existential dread. "We'll need a distraction," Kellen said, pacing the small space. "Something to draw their attention away while we get into the mainframe." "I can handle that," Amara offered. "Let me be the bait." "No," Syntelis said firmly. "We stick together, we can't risk anyone getting caught alone." "Then what do you propose?" Kellen asked, raising an eyebrow. Syntelis thought for a moment, then grinned. "We give them a system bug they'll never forget." The plan was simple: hack into their network, loop the security feeds, and use the chaos to slip into the mainframe. Easy, right? Except none of them were hackers, and alien tech wasn't exactly user-friendly. But they'd make it work. They had to. "Once we have evidence, we broadcast it," Amara said, a fierce determination in her voice. "Let the universe know what's really going on here." "And if we get caught?" Kellen asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Then we improvise," Syntelis replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. They spent the rest of the night going over the details, ironing out the kinks as best as they could. By the time they parted, the first hints of dawn were creeping into the corridors. "Tomorrow night," Syntelis said as they left, "we make history." As he lay in bed, sleep eluded him. His mind was a storm of thoughts and fears, but beneath it all, a spark of hope burned bright. They'd come this far, and there was no turning back now. The next day was a blur of meditation sessions and tense anticipation. Syntelis went through the motions, his mind elsewhere. When evening finally arrived, he was more than ready. They gathered in the shadows, hearts pounding like war drums. This was it, the moment of truth. And as they moved through the silent halls, Syntelis couldn't help but think that this was what it meant to be human: stubborn, defiant, and unyieldingly hopeful in the face of impossible odds. The aliens might have thought they could mold humanity to their liking, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail. Humans had a knack for surviving, and they weren't about to roll over and play dead. Not now. Not ever. The announcement of intensive meditation was as welcome as a bout of space flu, and the humans in the room wore expressions that ranged from annoyed to downright murderous. Syntelis couldn't blame them. Being in a monastery run by aliens was bad enough without having to double down on the cosmic navel-gazing. "So, what's on today's menu?" Amara drawled, plopping down next to him at the breakfast table. "Nutrient paste with a side of existential crisis. Don't forget a heaping helping of self-doubt," Syntelis replied, poking at the gray sludge with his fork. "Our favorite." Kellen joined them, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. "I'd kill for some real bacon." "Get caught, and they might let you find out what alien hell looks like," Syntelis quipped. If alien hell was anything like this monastery, It probably involved a lot of uncomfortable chairs and endless meditation sessions. And who knew how many more initiatives Xyler had up its many sleeves? Syntalis suspected there were enough to clothe a small army. They slid into the day's routine with all the enthusiasm of prisoners heading to the gallows. The corridors stretched endlessly, each turn a calculated effort to disorient. After another mind-numbing round of molecular meditation, Syntalis joined Amara and Kellen in the storage room. The air was stale and heavy with the scent of alien sweat, or whatever the hell aliens excreted when they were anxious. "All right," Syntalis said, keeping his voice low. "We need to talk strategy." Amara crossed her arms, leaning against a crate. "I'm all ears, boss. How do we screw over our six-legged overlords today?" Kellen pulled out a small device they'd managed to scavenge from the tech bay. "I rigged this beauty up. Should cause a nice little blackout when the time's right." "Perfect," Syntalis said, feeling an uncharacteristic flicker of hope. "We hit them during meditation. They'll be too busy pretending to commune with the universe to notice us slipping in." Amara grinned, and it was almost predatory. "Just the way I like it. They think we're mindless drones, right? Let's prove 'em wrong." The plan was simple in theory and damn near impossible in practice. But that was the human spirit for you, tenacious enough to make a bad idea sound brilliant. They spent the rest of the day dodging surveillance and whispering to potential recruits whenever they were sure no one was listening. Most of the humans were too cowed or too indoctrinated to join their little rebellion, but a few were interested enough to ask questions. By evening, the trio had gathered a small group of conspirators who shared their skepticism and a mutual dislike for Xyler's smugness. Brother Syntalis, Amara, Kellen, and their newfound companions huddled in the cramped storage room once more. The air was electric with tension and the occasional whiff of unwashed humanity. "Brother Linus," Syntalis said, introducing a tall, thin man with the pallor of someone who clearly didn't get enough sun. "He's good with tech." Linus nodded, fiddling with his glasses as if expecting them to spontaneously combust. "I can help with the mainframe. It's a mess of alien code, but I've been studying it during downtime. Just need access to a terminal. The plan is risky," Kellen added, casting a wary glance at the door. "But it's the only shot we've got." Amara crossed her arms, a smirk playing at her lips. "So, what are we waiting for? Let's give them a real show." Even with the weight of potential failure looming over them, Syntalis couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation. This was their rebellion, their chance to do more than just survive. "We move on the next meditation session," he said, eyeing the motley crew assembled before him. "Remember, no second chances. We get in, get the data, and get out. If things go south, we improvise," Amara interrupted, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the fight. The night passed in a haze of nerves and anticipation, each minute ticking by with excruciating slowness. Syntalis lay awake, his mind swirling with possibilities, most of them ending in disaster. When morning finally arrived, it brought with it a sense of grim determination. They were past the point of no return, and the thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As the day's enforced routine unfolded, Syntalis found himself hyper-aware of every alien gaze, every flicker of surveillance. He had to remind himself to stay calm, to act like everything was normal. But inside, adrenaline coursed through his veins like an electric current. The meditation session was a monotonous affair, made bearable only by the knowledge that it was their last one. As they settled into the uncomfortable metal seats, Syntalis exchanged a glance with Amara. She gave him a small nod, her expression fierce. As Xyler droned on about cosmic harmony and molecular alignment, Syntalis felt a spark of excitement build. It was time. Kellen slipped the device out of his robes, glancing around to ensure they weren't being watched. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he activated it. The alien tech in the room flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. In the confusion, Syntalis and his team sprang into action. They moved swiftly, slipping out of the contemplation room and into the labyrinthine corridors. Linus led the way, his knowledge of the monastery's layout proving invaluable. They reached the mainframe room without incident, Linus immediately setting to work. The room was a tangle of wires and blinking lights, the heart of the alien tech that controlled the monastery. "Hurry," Syntellis urged, keeping an ear out for any signs of pursuit. "I'm on it," Linus muttered, fingers flying over the alien keyboard. "Just need to bypass the security protocols." The tension in the room was palpable, each second stretching interminably. Finally, Linus let out a triumphant hiss. "Got it." He began downloading data, the screens lighting up with streams of alien code. Syntellis watched, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is it," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're really doing it." Syntellis nodded, unable to suppress a grin. It was reckless, audacious, and utterly insane, but it was also exhilarating. The download completed, and Linus ejected the data drive with a flourish. "All set. Let's get the hell out of here." As they retraced their steps through the monastery, the adrenaline high began to fade, replaced by the creeping dread of being discovered. But the corridors remained silent, the only sound their quiet footsteps. They reached the storage room without incident, the weight of what they'd accomplished settling over them like a shroud. Syntellis could hardly believe it. They'd done it. They had the evidence, the proof they needed to expose the truth. "Now comes the hard part," Kellen said, running a hand through his hair. "Getting this out to the universe. One step at a time," Syntellis replied, though he couldn't keep the edge of exultation from his voice. "We did it. We actually did it." Amara laughed, the sound a welcome relief after the tension of the day. "We sure did. Now let's make sure it wasn't for nothing." They spent the next hours huddled together, devising a way to broadcast the data without alerting the aliens to their plan. It was a delicate operation, fraught with the risk of exposure, but if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was defying the odds. As the night wore on, they finalized their plan. It was a gamble, a shot in the dark, but it was the best chance they had. "Ready?" Syntellis asked, meeting each of their gazes in turn. Amara nodded, her expression fierce. "Ready as I'll ever be." Kellen gave a thumbs up, his usual skepticism tempered by determination. "Let's do this." Linus adjusted his glasses, a nervous grin on his face. "I've got your back." Together, they made their way to the communications hub, every step loaded with significance. If they succeeded, it would be a blow against their captors, a chance to reclaim their freedom. As they reached the hub, Syntellis took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. The room was empty, the equipment humming with potential. "Let's make history," Amara whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their hearts pounding in unison. Linus got to work, connecting the data drive to the system. The screens lit up, displaying the damning evidence they'd risked so much to obtain. Syntellis watched, his pulse racing. This was it, their chance to expose the truth, to shatter the facade the aliens had constructed. As Linus initiated the broadcast, the room filled with the hum of technology, the data surging out into the ether. It was a moment of pure triumph, a defiance of everything that had been forced upon them. And yet, even as the data streamed out, Syntellis couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They'd struck a blow, but the war was far from over. "Here's to humanity," Amara said, raising an imaginary glass. "We might be a mess, but we're a damn resilient one." "To humanity," Syntellis echoed, feeling a surge of pride. As the broadcast continued, the weight of their actions settled over them. They'd done it, defied their captors, reclaimed their agency. And now the universe would know the truth. But as they stood there, basking in their victory, the realization dawned that this was only the start of a larger fight. The aliens wouldn't take this lightly, and the repercussions would be swift and severe. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us," Kellen said, a hint of grim amusement in his voice. Syntellis nodded, his resolve hardening. "Let them come. We're just getting started." And as the transmission went out, carrying their message to the stars, they stood together, unified, defiant, and unyielding in the face of whatever came next. The monastery was silent as a graveyard, a fitting metaphor considering what was about to go down. The corridors, as usual, had the charming quality of a drunken octopus's maze, twisting in a way that made anyone sober wish they were drunk. But the navigation wasn't the problem today. Today, the problem was that the aliens had finally caught on to their little act of rebellion. Brother Syntelis, Amara, Kellen, and Linus found themselves in the storage room yet again, but this time the air was thicker with more than just the smell of unwashed bodies. It reeked of tension and, unfortunately, the sigh or stench of fear. "We've got a problem, folks," Syntelis announced, not bothering to sugarcoat it because, really, who had the time for sugar when you were about to be crushed by a giant alien foot? "Xyler's on to us. They've captured some of our people." Amara leaned against the wall, trying her best to look unfazed, though the crease on her forehead betrayed her. "How bad? Bad enough," Kellen said, his voice dripping with resignation. He fiddled with some wires as if he could fix their dilemma with a bit of tech wizardry. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. They've got Brother Linus and 3 others. They're holding them in the main wing. Great, Amara sighed, sarcasm heavy as a neutron star. Next thing you know, they'll be teaching us the finer points of alien hospitality, which I'm guessing involves probing of the non-consensual kind. Syntelis rubbed his temples. "We need a plan." "A better plan," Linus, miraculously not captured, nodded. "We can't just leave them. But the main wing is a fortress. It's practically begging for us to fail." "Story of my life," Syntelis muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The quartet stood in silence, each absorbed in their grim thoughts. The weight of their situation pressed down on them, a reminder that their little rebellion was teetering on the edge of a very steep cliff. Amara finally broke the silence, her voice a lifeline in the sea of despair. "Okay, so we're screwed. Good." "I was getting bored of all this success," Kellen snorted. "Positive thinking is overrated anyway." Syntelis couldn't help but chuckle, though it came out more like a choked cough. "What do you say we pull a classic human move? Improvise. That worked so well last time," Linus pointed out dryly. "Hey, we're still alive, aren't we?" Syntelis said. "Let's get creative. We distract, we sneak, we grab our people, and we get the hell out." "Simple as that." "Simple," Amara echoed, raising an eyebrow. Simple would be sitting in the contemplation room listening to Xyler talk about molecular harmony. "This is anything but," Kellen shrugged. "I say we go for it. If we fail, at least we'll fail spectacularly." Syntelis clapped him on the shoulder. "I like the way you think. Let's make this a show to remember." And so, with a plan as haphazard as a toddler's crayon drawing, they set out. The corridors were still empty, but there was a palpable sense of foreboding lingering in the air. The kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and do a little dance. They made their way to the main wing, encountering no resistance, which was either a good sign or a very, very bad one. Syntelis didn't dwell on it. If they were walking into a trap, they'd find out soon enough. Inside the main wing, it was eerily quiet. Too quiet if you wanted to be cliché, and Syntelis really didn't, but sometimes life had a way of turning into a bad holo novel. "What's the plan, boss?" Kellen whispered, eyeing the corridor ahead with the wariness of a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Syntelis pondered for a moment. "We split up. Amara and I will cause a diversion. Linus, you and Kellen find the others and get them out." Amara grinned, and it was a grin that spelled trouble with a capital T. "I do love a good diversion. Try not to blow anything up," Syntelis said. "We do want some part of this monastery still standing, preferably with us outside it." "Can't promise anything," Amara replied, her eyes gleaming with mischief. They split into their respective groups. Syntelis and Amara headed down the left corridor, stirring up chaos wherever they could. It wasn't hard. Most of the aliens they encountered were so startled by the sight of humans running amok that they froze like rabbits in headlights. Meanwhile, Linus and Kellen moved with purpose, navigating the labyrinth of halls with an efficiency that would have been impressive if not for the circumstances. They reached the holding area, a stark room that screamed bad things happen here. "Looks like we found the right place," Kellen said, eyeing the alien guards with distaste. Linus nodded, his gaze fixed on the captives. Let's get them out. The ensuing scuffle was short but intense. Alien guards weren't exactly known for their combat prowess, but they sure as hell made up for it with numbers. Linus and Kellen fought with the desperation of men who knew they were running out of options. We've got to move now. Linus called, freeing brother Linus and the others. The group, now reunited, made a hasty retreat, their escape a precarious balance between speed and stealth. They didn't have the luxury of planning, only the raw need to survive, and somehow, against all odds, they managed to reach the rendezvous point. Amara and Syntalis were already there, looking harried but triumphant. We did it, Amara panted, leaning against the wall. We got them out. Damn right we did, Syntalis replied, adrenaline still coursing through him like a live wire. Kellen glanced around, counting heads and making sure no one was missing. All here. Now what? Now we get the hell out of Dodge, Linus said, the relief in his voice palpable. The journey back through the corridors felt like a fever dream, each step laden with the fear of capture. But as they neared the exit, the weight of their success began to lift, replaced by a flicker of hope. They emerged into the open air, the cold biting at their skin like an unwanted reminder of reality. But they were free, and for now that was all that mattered. We did it, Syntalis said, his voice barely above a whisper. We actually did it. Amara laughed, the sound bright and full of life. I knew we would. We're too stubborn to fail. Stubborn, stupid, same difference, Kellen added with a smirk. Linus adjusted his glasses, a broad grin on his face. Let's not make a habit of this, all right. As they stood there, basking in the glow of their hard-won freedom, Syntalis couldn't help but think about the road ahead. They'd won a battle, sure, but the war was far from over. Here's to the human spirit, Amara said, her tone both mocking and sincere. May it be as unyielding as ever. To the human spirit, Syntalis echoed, feeling that familiar surge of pride. They'd survived another day, defied the odds once more. And though the future was uncertain, they faced it together, united, defiant, and ready for whatever came next. The alien threat loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon, but for now they had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The storage room had an atmosphere that could best be described as prison cell chic. Dim lighting, check. Cold metal surfaces, double check. The air, stale and heavy, pressed down on brother Syntalis and his ragtag crew as if trying to squeeze out whatever hope they'd managed to scrape together. But hope was a resilient little bugger, and humans had a way of finding it in the most unlikely places. Syntalis paced the room, trying to ignore the fact that the floor was sticky with something he really didn't want to think about. All right, folks, he began, his voice carrying a hint of the theatrical. We need to figure out how the hell we're going to outsmart a bunch of aliens who think they are smarter than us. Amara leaned against a crate, feigning nonchalance. What do you think their IQ is? 200. 300? Or are they just compensating for having the personality of a damp rag? Kellen was hunched over his favorite pile of wires, fingers dancing like a caffeinated pianist. It's not about IQ, Amara. It's about the fact they've had millions of years to perfect their smug superiority. Linus, ever the realist, folded his arms. Great. So we're dealing with a cosmic version of that kid you hated in school because he always had the right answer. Exactly, Syntalis replied with a grin that bordered on manic. Only this time we get to cheat. Amara perked up, eyes gleaming. Cheating, you say? Now you're speaking my language. Syntalis chuckled. Well, Xyler and friends made a big mistake. They underestimated something they don't have. A little human quirk I like to call stubborn ingenuity. Kellen looked up from his tech tangle, curiosity piqued. Care to elaborate, or are we supposed to guess? Think about it, Syntalis said, crossing his arms. They've got us running around like marionettes, thinking we're just confused, scared humans. But what if we use that to our advantage? Make them think they've still got the upper hand while we flip the board. Classic misdirection, Linus interjected. Like a magic trick, Amara snorted. Sure, because nothing says magic like a group of half-starved humans in monastery robes. Syntalis shrugged. Desperate times call for desperate measures and all that. Kellen's eyes lit up in the way that meant he just stumbled onto something. You know, the old tech bay's got some stuff we haven't even touched yet. I bet we could rig something up to cause a distraction. Amara's grin widened. What kind of distraction are we talking? Fireworks, explosions, something that'll make the alien's little insectoid head spin. Kellen gave a non-committal shrug. Why not all three? Syntelis clapped his hands, the noise echoing in the cramped space. This is what I'm talking about. We use their own arrogance against them, make them think we're just being our predictable, chaotic selves. Meanwhile, we'll be working on the real plan, something they won't see coming. Linus raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched on his face. And what exactly is the real plan? Simple, Syntalis replied, the wheels turning in his mind. We find a way to get into their main control room, cause a systems-wide blackout, and make our escape in the confusion. Simple, Amara echoed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Right, because breaking into the most secure part of the monastery is just a walk in the park. It's a park with armed guards and probable death, Kellen added, not missing a beat. Look, Syntelis said, it's a long shot, I know. But it's the only shot we've got. And by the stars, if we're going down, let's do it swinging. There was a moment of silence, a collective pause as they weighed the odds against them. Spoiler alert, the odds sucked. But then again, humans had a funny way of thriving in situations where they had no business surviving. Amara pushed off the crate, a newfound determination in her step. All right, I'm in. If we're going to die, let's at least make it entertaining. Entertainment is overrated, but sure, why not? Linus said with a resigned sigh. Count me in too. Kellen stood up, brushing dust off his robe. I guess I'll see what I can scrounge up tech-wise. If we're going to do this, we'll need every advantage we can get. Syntalis nodded, a grin spreading across his face. That's the spirit. Let's show these aliens what happens when you underestimate Earth's finest. Finest, Amara smirked. Did you forget we're all here because we flunked out of better places? Details, Syntelis replied with a wave of his hand. We've got a mission, folks. Time to prove we're more than just a bunch of misplaced misfits. With that, the plan began to take shape. Kellen dove into the tech bay, a treasure trove of outdated machinery and forgotten gadgets. He muttered to himself as he worked, occasionally cursing in frustration when things didn't cooperate. Meanwhile, Syntelis and Amara scoped out the corridors leading to the control room. The place was a maze, sure, but by now they'd figured out enough of the layout to make it work. Hopefully the aliens were still buying the act of their ignorance. Linus took on the task of crafting a few decoys, crude things, hardly more than scarecrows with random bits of tech attached. But in the darkness and confusion, they'd serve their purpose well enough. At least, that was the hope. As they regrouped in the storage room, Syntelis couldn't help but feel a cautious optimism. It was a rare and fragile thing in their line of work, but it was there nonetheless. So what's the verdict, Kellen? Syntelis asked, looking over at the tech whiz. Well, Kellen replied, wiping sweat from his forehead, we've got a couple of EMP devices, makeshift smoke bombs, and a few noisemakers. It's not much, but it should be enough to make a scene. Amara tapped her chin thoughtfully. What about the guards? We can't just walk in and expect them to roll out the red carpet, Syntelis grinned. We won't have to, that's where the decoys come in. We place them at strategic points, set off some fireworks, and in the chaos we slip right past. It's risky, Linus pointed out. But then again, we're not exactly swimming in options. And the control room? Amara asked. Once we're in, how do we pull the plug? Kellen held up a small device, a proud gleam in his eyes. Managed to rig this from an old interface. With any luck, we can override their systems long enough to shut everything down. It's a one-way ticket, though. Once it's done, we'll have to move fast. Syntalis nodded, feeling the adrenaline start to build. All right, team, this is it. We've got one shot to make this work. Let's show these aliens what we're really made of. With their plan as ready as it was ever going to be, they set out. The corridors were silent, save for the occasional hum of alien machinery. It was a sound that had become all too familiar, yet never any less unnerving. They moved with purpose, a motley crew of misfits on a mission. Each step took them closer to the heart of the monastery, where the control room lay waiting. As they reached the first checkpoint, Sintalis and Amara got to work setting up the decoys. Linus and Kellen moved ahead, placing smoke bombs and EMP in their designated spots. "Ready?" Sintalis asked, glancing at his team. "Ready as we'll ever be," Amara replied, her voice steady. With a nod, Sintalis hit the trigger. The decoys sprang to life, lights flashing and noisemakers blaring. It was pandemonium, the racket echoing through the halls like a symphony of chaos. In the confusion, they slipped past the guards, who were too busy trying to figure out what the hell was happening to notice the humans sneaking by. The control room was just ahead, a fortress of alien technology. The door loomed before them, an imposing barrier that seemed to dare them to try. Kellen worked quickly, the makeshift device in hand. "Almost. Got it," he muttered, fingers flying over the controls. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the control room in all its alien glory. Machinery hummed and screens flickered, a testament to the technological prowess of their captors. "Let's do this," Sintalis said, stepping inside. They moved with urgency, knowing their window of opportunity was limited. Kellen attached his device to the main console, fingers dancing over the keys. 10 seconds, he announced, sweat beading on his forehead. Sintalis braced himself, aware that this was the point of no return. If they failed now, it was all over. 5 seconds, Kellen called out, his voice tense. The room seemed to hold its breath, the hum of machinery a constant undercurrent. 3, 2, 1. A shudder ran through the control room as the device activated. Lights flickered, screens went dark, and the hum of machinery died away, leaving behind a silence that was almost deafening. "It worked," Kellen breathed, disbelief and relief mingling in his voice. "Then let's not waste it," Sintalis said, motioning for the others to move. They raced through the corridors, the monastery now plunged into chaos. Aliens scrambled, trying to restore order, but they were too late. The humans were already making their escape. The exit loomed ahead, a gateway to freedom. They burst through, the cold air biting at their skin, a reminder that they were still alive. Amara let out a whoop of triumph, the sound echoing in the night. "We did it! We actually did it!" Sintalis couldn't help but grin, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Damn right we did, and we're not done yet. This is just the beginning." Linus adjusted his glasses, a weary but satisfied smile on his face. "Let's make sure it stays that way." As they stood there, basking in their hard-won victory, a realization began to dawn. They had taken the first step in a new direction, one that promised both danger and hope in equal measure. And as they faced the future, uncertain yet unafraid, they knew one thing for sure: they wouldn't go down without a fight. Not now, not ever. The monastery's corridors were buzzing with the kind of chaos that would make a beehive seem like a Zen garden. Sintalis led the charge, his robe flapping behind him like a flag of ridiculous defiance. The aliens, with their slick bodysuits and superior attitudes, were scrambling like they'd just been told their starship warranties had expired. "Remind me why we're not running the other way." Linus grumbled, dodging a panicked alien who seemed unsure whether to stop them or just cry about it. "Because we love the thrill of the chase," Amara shot back, her smirk showing just how much she was enjoying the pandemonium. "And we've come this far without dying. I'd say that's a win. Let's keep it that way," Sintalis replied, eyes scanning for their target, the contemplation room where Brother Xyler held court like a king on an ant farm. They had a date with destiny, or at the very least, a smug alien who needed a good talking to. The team skidded to a halt outside the contemplation room, the door sliding open to reveal Xyler mid-meditation, his insectoid features serenely unfazed by the chaos outside. The room was as uncomfortable as ever, the kind of place that made you question every life choice that led you there. "Sintalis," Xyler greeted, one compound eye opening in what might have been mild surprise, or possibly the alien equivalent of a bored shrug. I didn't expect to see you here. Although, given the circumstances, I suppose I should have. Yeah, well, here I am, Syntalis said, stepping forward with the sort of bravado usually reserved for last stands and final acts of stupidity. I thought it was time we had a little chat about your so-called molecular meditation. Xyler tilted his head, an amused click emanating from his mandibles. I assume you've come to extol the virtues of human unpredictability. The thought crossed my mind, Syntalis replied, crossing his arms. But mostly I wanted to point out that your meditation sessions feel less like alignment and more like a headache wrapped in a Zen koan. Kellen chuckled, shaking his head. And not the fun kind of headache either. Xyler's amusement was palpable, which was saying something for being with no discernible facial expressions. You humans truly are remarkable. Always seeking chaos where there should be order. Newsflash. Xyler, Amara interjected, order's overrated. Chaos is where the magic happens. Just ask anyone who's ever been stuck in a traffic jam. The alien leader finally unfolded his limbs, standing with a grace that only a creature evolved over millions of years could muster. I suppose you intend to disrupt our operations. A noble effort, but ultimately futile. Syntalis echoed, raising an eyebrow. Maybe. But we've made it this far, and I've yet to see you aliens handle unpredictability with anything but a confused stare. Linus snorted. Honestly, it's like watching a cat try to understand why the red dot won't die. Xyler considered them, eyes narrowing slightly. You believe your chaos to be a strength. It is merely a tool of destruction. Destruction's just another word for change, Syntalis countered. And I'd say it's about time you lot embraced a little change, don't you think? The alien leader glanced around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps there is something to be learned from your tenacity, Kellen snorted. Tenacity. Yeah, let's go with that. It sounds nicer than reckless stupidity. Either way, Syntalis continued, we're not here to ask for permission. We're here to show you that underestimating humans was your first mistake, and tying your spaceship insurance to a single broker, Amara added with a grin. Big mistake. A flicker of something passed through Xyler's gaze, could have been respect, annoyance, or just gas. Hard to tell with aliens. Very well, you've made your point. But what do you intend to do now? Syntalis gestured to his team, the motley crew that had somehow become more than just a ragtag group of rebels. We're going to keep moving forward, and if you want to stop us, you're welcome to try. Linus fixed his glasses, grinning. But fair warning, we've got a few more tricks up our sleeves. And we're not afraid to use them. You have altered the status quo, Xyler acknowledged, wings twitching slightly. It seems we have much to reconsider. Good, Syntalis said, turning on his heel. Use that big bug brain of yours and think about what happens when you let chaos slip through the cracks. As they left the contemplation room behind, Amara leaned in. Think you'll take our advice? Not a chance, Kellen replied. But we gave him something to chew on, and that's more than enough. Let's just hope he doesn't choke on it, Linus added, rolling his eyes. Because I'm pretty sure none of us are certified to perform Heimlich on an alien. The group moved on, navigating the twisted corridors with the kind of expertise only a desperate escape plan could inspire. Syntalis led with a determination he hadn't felt in years, fueled by the adrenaline of a successful confrontation and the simple joy of proving the bastards wrong. There's the exit, Amara called, pointing ahead. The door loomed like the answer to a question that had been asked too many times, promising freedom and a chance at something more. They burst through it, the chill of the outside air a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the monastery. For a moment they paused, breathing in the crisp air of victory. All right, folks, Syntalis said, clapping his hands. We've got a head start, but let's not waste it. We're not out of the woods yet, or the cosmic equivalent of the woods, Linus added with a nod. We might have shaken them, but they'll regroup eventually. True, Kellen agreed, checking the makeshift device he'd cobbled together. But we've got this far, and I say we keep pushing. There's a lot more galaxy out there, and who's to say we can't make it ours? Amara grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Damn straight. Let's show them what happens when humanity gets a foothold. As they moved on, leaving the monastery and its tangled corridors behind, Syntelis felt a rare sense of hope. It was a fragile thing, easily crushed, but he held onto it all the same. Because sometimes, hope was all you needed. That, and a team of misfits crazy enough to believe in the impossible. Together, they'd shown the universe what humans were truly capable of. And as they set their sights on new horizons, Syntelis knew one thing for certain: the galaxy had better watch out. Because Earth's finest were just getting started. The group kept moving, the thrill of their escape still fresh in their minds, but they couldn't let up now. They were fugitives in a universe that looked down on their kind, and every step was a reminder of the odds stacked against them. But if they'd learned anything, it was that odds didn't matter. They were just numbers, and numbers couldn't predict the unpredictable. So, where to next? Linus asked, breaking the silence. His tone carried the kind of curiosity one usually reserved for choosing a new restaurant, not a new life on the run. Anywhere but here sounds good to me, Amara replied, kicking a stray rock out of her path. Preferably somewhere with a decent bar, or a tech bay that doesn't look like it's been pilfered by scavengers, Kellen added, still nursing an unspoken affection for all things mechanical. Syntelis shrugged, the weight of leadership feeling a little bit lighter for once. We'll figure it out as we go. We've got each other, and that's more than enough. Heartwarming, Linus said, his voice dripping with mock sentimentality. But maybe less of the pep talk and more of the action plan. Syntelis nodded, conceding the point. All right. First order of business, find a place to lay low. Second order, regroup and strategize our next move. Sounds like a plan, Amara said, stretching her back. But let's not forget the third order, not getting shot by cranky aliens, Kellen smirked, adjusting his robe, or blown up. You know how these things go. As they trudged on, each step taking them farther from the life they'd known, the enormity of their situation began to sink in. They were outlaws now, rebels without a cause, or with a cause but without a map. But that was fine. Maps were overrated anyway. Think the aliens will come after us? Amara asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Probably, Linus replied, but let them. We've proven we can hold our own. Syntelis chuckled, his confidence renewed. Yeah, let them come. Because if there's one thing we've learned today, it's that humans are a hell of a lot tougher than they think. And with that, they set off into the unknown, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw their way. They were a team now, bound by a shared purpose and a stubborn refusal to give up. No matter what happened, they wouldn't go down without a fight. Not now, not ever. They'd shown the universe that they were more than just a ragtag band of rebels. They were survivors, fighters, and dreamers all rolled into one. And that was something no amount of alien superiority could ever take away. As they moved away from the monastery, its monolithic shadow finally fading behind them, Syntelis couldn't help but feel a wave of relief, as if he'd just slipped out of a straitjacket made of existential dread and alien bureaucracy. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air tasted like freedom, with just a hint of impending doom, like any good liberation should. Ah, sweet freedom, Amara declared, stretching her arms wide as if to embrace the universe's boundless possibilities, or maybe just trying to shake off a cramp. I've missed you, you elusive bastard, Linus grunted, adjusting his robe like a man born perpetually uncomfortable. Let's not get too cozy, folks. We've still got an entire galaxy of holier-than-thou aliens to dodge. Always the optimist, Linus, Syntelis replied, flashing a grin. But hey, at least we're doing it in style. Nothing says rebellion like a bunch of humans in monk robes. Kellen, who'd been fiddling with the makeshift device he proudly dubbed the Chaos Converter, essentially a glorified taser for tech, looked up, his eyes gleaming with the kind of manic glee usually reserved for mad scientists and caffeinated toddlers. I'd say we pulled off a pretty neat trick, though. Made those aliens look like they just walked in on their parents' anniversary dinner. Not quite how I'd put it, Amara interjected, but I'll take it. The group trudged along, each step a reminder of the chaos they'd sown and the chaos yet to come. Despite the uncertainty, there was an unspoken understanding among them, a camaraderie forged in fire, sarcasm, and the occasional poorly planned outburst. "Think they'll remember us?" Amara asked, her tone lighter than a pile of neutronium. "We did sort of ruin their day, remember?" Kellen snorted. "They'll probably have a permanent Syntalis-shaped dartboard in the contemplation room now." "Good," Syntalis said with a smirk. "I've always wanted to leave a lasting impression." Linus shook his head, exuding the energy of a man resigned to following a leader whose plans were a mix of brilliance and emergency improvisation. "Let's just hope they don't use it for target practice." As they pushed forward, the alien monastery became a distant memory, a blot on the horizon, both physically and metaphorically. The galaxy sprawled out before them like a vast, unpredictable labyrinth, full of potential and peril. "All right, team," Syntalis announced, doing his best to sound like a leader who knew exactly what he was doing. "First order of business is finding a place to regroup. Somewhere with decent Wi-Fi and no alien overlords. Can we also look for a decent bathroom?" Linus said, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who'd seen too many restroom horrors. "I'm pretty sure the last one I used was haunted." "Duly noted," Syntalis replied, suppressing a chuckle. "Everyone keep your eyes peeled for a spaceport or a friendly trading post. We need to get our bearings and figure out our next steps." They continued their journey, instinctively drawn together like magnetized debris caught in a cosmic storm. Their shared experiences bound them in ways that transcended their initial motives, and Syntalis knew that, whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As they walked, Amara fell into step beside him. "You think we'll ever come back here?" she asked, her voice thoughtful beneath its usual layer of sass. "Not if I can help it," Syntalis replied, though there was a hint of something deeper in his voice, perhaps a recognition that, despite everything, this place had changed them. "But who knows? Maybe someday we'll turn it into a tourist trap. Come see the infamous monastery where humans gave the middle finger to the galaxy." Catchy slogan, Amara said with a grin. "I'd visit." "Yeah, well," Syntalis shrugged, "let's just focus on staying out of their clutches for now. If they come after us, we'll deal with it. We've got a few tricks up our sleeves, remember?" "True," Amara agreed, her gaze sweeping the horizon. "And if there's one thing we've learned, it's that humans can be a real pain in the ass when they want to be." The landscape before them gradually shifted, the barren terrain giving way to hints of civilization, shimmering lights in the distance, the faint hum of engines, and the kind of low-level chaos that felt like home. "Looks like we've got some options," Linus noted, gesturing toward a cluster of buildings barely visible in the distance. "Think they'll roll out the welcome mat?" Kellen asked, his voice tinged with hope and skepticism. "Depends on whether they've heard of us yet," Syntalis replied with a wry grin. "But let's give it a shot. Worst-case scenario, we get chased out by an angry mob." "Optimism at its finest," Amara quipped. "Can't wait to see how this one pans out." They pressed on, the lights drawing them in like moths to a flame, albeit moths with a penchant for causing trouble and challenging the status quo. It wasn't long before they reached the outskirts of a bustling spaceport, its activity a stark contrast to the monastery's oppressive silence. The spaceport was a cacophony of noise and motion, a vibrant tapestry of life and technology mashed together in a chaotic blend of species and cultures. Syntalis couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging amidst the throng of beings who, like them, were just trying to carve out a place for themselves in an indifferent universe. "All right, folks," Syntalis said, rallying his team. "Let's see what we can find here. Keep your heads down and don't draw too much attention." "Right," Linus muttered, "because we're so good at blending in." As they navigated the bustling corridors, the spaceport's energy seeped into them, infusing their steps with renewed purpose. They were fugitives, yes, but they were also dreamers, survivors, and warriors without a battlefield. Yet, after some deft maneuvering and a few questionable shortcuts, they found themselves in a quiet corner of the spaceport, away from the prying eyes of security and the curious gazes of passers-by. It was a makeshift sanctuary, a place to catch their breath and plan their next move. "All right, team," Syntelis said, gathering them in close. "We've made it this far, but we need to think long-term. We're not just running, we're fighting for something bigger. Like what?" Kellen asked, his curiosity tinged with skepticism. "Like freedom," Syntelis replied, his voice steady. "Not just for us, but for everyone who's ever been held down by those self-righteous aliens." Amara nodded, her usual smirk tempered by determination. "Yeah, we've got a shot at making a real difference. Let's not waste it, so what's the plan?" Linus asked, glancing around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. Syntelis considered their options, the weight of leadership once again settling on his shoulders. But this time it wasn't a burden, it was a responsibility he embraced. "We keep pushing," he said, his voice firm. "We find allies, we gather resources, and we take the fight to them. We've proven we can disrupt their operations. Now we need to show them we're here to stay." Kellen grinned, his enthusiasm infectious. "I like it. Let's make them regret ever underestimating us, and maybe pick up a few good drinks along the way," Amara added with a wink. Rebellions are thirsty work. They shared a laugh, the camaraderie that had carried them through thick and thin now stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bonded by a shared purpose and an unyielding spirit. The galaxy had thrown everything it had at them, and they'd come out stronger for it. They were a force to be reckoned with, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the human race. And as they prepared to take their next steps into the unknown, Syntelis knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The universe was vast, and their fight was just getting started. But for now, they had each other, and that was more than enough. "All right, team," Syntelis said, leading the way with a newfound sense of purpose. "Let's show the galaxy what humans are really made of." And with that, they set off into the bustling heart of the spaceport, ready to face whatever the future held. They were rebels, survivors, and dreamers, and they wouldn't rest until their fight was won. Because in the end, the galaxy wasn't just a place to live. It was theirs to shape, to challenge, and to claim. And they were damn well going to do it, one snarky remark at a time.